One of the most notorious queens of England was Anne Boleyn, who is remembered for the fact she lost her head inside of the Tower of London at the hands of her own husband, the infamous King Henry VIII. Anne was a woman who little exists of today, as Henry tried his hardest to get rid of everything to do with her, with many paintings being destroyed. Her remains were discovered during the 19th century, following excavations to the Tower of London's chapel. But she was buried a short distance away from her execution scaffold, but there are many different things that over the centuries were debated and were made up about her. Because of this, a lot of myths have emerged about the second wife of King Henry VIII, but let's have a look at a few of these. Join us today as we look at the myths about Anne Boleyn that are not true, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Following Anne Boleyn's execution, there was a lot of strange rumours that emerged about her, and some of these were said to have been very bizarre and shocking. One of these was that she allegedly had 6 fingers on one hand. This is of course incorrect and false, and there is no evidence that at the time supports this fact, and of course it would have been written about if true. Much was documented at the time about Anne, especially by those who disliked her and sided with Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife. One of those was Eustace Chapuis, a man who served as the imperial ambassador to the Roman emperor, and he documented much about Anne Boleyn, referring to her as a concubine at times, but he never mentioned a 6th finger or anything similar, and he would have certainly done this if this was the case. Also, when the Queen's body was discovered during restoration work inside the Tower of London's chapel, then it was not reported that she had an extra finger on one of her hands, but they did identify that she had a very slight and small neck. Another common belief is that Anne Boleyn was actually executed for witchcraft, a crime which would in the centuries after sentence many women across Britain to death. Witches were a heavily feared part of Tudor society, and also in the centuries later. However, it would not be what sent Anne to her date with the swordsman. She was actually executed for other crimes, treason, adultery and incest, but was not condemned for witchcraft. However, what is strange is that Henry VIII may at times have referred to his wife in this similar manner, and he claimed that he was bewitched by Anne, and was almost cast a spell upon to marry her. He spoke with these allegations, but witchcraft was something that was never brought for her trial. But regarding that charge of incest, it was claimed that she and her brother George Boleyn had kissed and had a physical relationship. Despite this sending Anne and George to their executions, it was something which categorically no evidence exists regarding a charge of incest. It's known that Anne and George were close as brothers and sisters are, but it's not known that anything went further than this. The charge of incest was something which was probably fabricated by Henry VIII's chief advisor, Thomas Cromwell, who was tasked to bring down Anne. He meticulously planned her downfall, and he needed men to be implicated with the Queen, and he found George to be the perfect person for this, as he was seen in private with his sister a lot. This would provide Cromwell with evidence, and there were even rumours that George's jealous wife would provide evidence about this. Another strange thing that has been levelled against Anne Boleyn and also her family is that they may have been behind the deaths of a number of influential people. One of these rumours is that Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, was poisoned by Anne Boleyn or the Boleyn family to justify the legitimacy of Anne's marriage to the king. One thing that led to this myth was that Catherine of Aragon's heart, which was removed during the embalming process, was said to have been black, something which has long been attributed and been linked to poisoning. Another possible poisoning took place in the household of Bishop John Fisher, a man who was very opposed to Anne Boleyn and her rise to the position of queen. Fisher was not quiet in his complaints either, and because of this, a cook inside of his household poisoned a meal one afternoon, which resulted in the deaths of 2 people, and many more were sick. Richard Roos, the cook, was later executed by being boiled alive for this, but many have claimed that Henry VIII or the Boleyns were in fact behind this. Did Anne order the poisoning to rid herself of a prominent dissenter? Also, a cannon was shot towards Fisher's household shortly after too. But there is no concrete evidence around this, But interestingly, Henry VIII did execute the cook without any trial possibly taking place, to maybe even hide evidence linking the crown or his wife to this. Another thing to consider, a myth, is the belief that Anne Boleyn was the most beautiful woman across England. This is not true, and there are a number of accounts that allude to Anne's beauty. One thing to mention though is that her sister Mary, who was a mistress of King Henry VIII and also the French king, was said to have been incredibly beautiful, and the prettier one of the two. One courtier stated about Anne's looks that, "Not one of the handsomest women in the world, she is of middling stature, swarthy complexion, long neck, wide mouth, a bosom not much raised, and eyes which are black and beautiful." These diplomats may have not been a fan of Anne, as they represented European interests in the English court. However, it was claimed that Anne did have a little neck, and that she may have also been rather slight. Another aim to slander the reputation of Anne was a rumour that emerged, saying that she gave birth to a deformed child. This was not the first time in history that a member of the royal family was accused of this. King Richard III was later slandered, saying that his mother was pregnant for 2 years with him, and that when he was born with a full set of teeth and other physical problems. But Anne did have a number of problems with giving birth to a child, and she had a number of tragic miscarriages during her marriage to Henry VIII. But there was much made about her final miscarriage and how it may have resulted in a boy, and it was said that it was a shapeless, deformed matter, but this was written about years after her death. This myth was similar to the one about her having 6 fingers, and was aimed to bring shame upon Anne's name and legacy. Another shocking myth was that Henry VIII was actually the father of Anne Boleyn. This myth emerged following rumours that Anne's mother had a poor reputation inside of court before she got married. The king was even forced to at one time deny this himself, and he stated that he had never been in a relationship with Anne's mother, but he did admit that he slept with her sister Mary, who was said to have been a beautiful woman at court and who became the king's official mistress. But one thing to debunk this myth was that Henry VIII was just a young child when Anne's mother was at court. But the charges that sent Anne to the executioner's scaffold inside of the Tower of London included adultery and treason. The evidence that was gained relating to this was that it was believed to have been fabricated, but 5 other men, including her brother, lost their lives because of these lies. It's not known that Anne was sleeping with other men in the royal court behind Henry VIII's back, and she is considered to have been a loyal woman. But the treason charge was also shocking, as she never plotted against her husband. Thomas Cromwell was responsible for these charges, and he even asked women to spy on Anne during her imprisonment and to gather information against her. Today, the memorial to those executed on the scaffold inside the Tower of London stands in front of the chapel on Tower Green. But this is a myth, and it's not there where Anne Boleyn lost her head. This memorial is meant to mark the site of the scaffold, but this was actually a short distance away on the north side of the White Tower, and was pressed up against the oldest part of the tower. This meant that Anne Boleyn was relatively sheltered when she went to her execution scaffold, and may have gone through her royal apartments and then through towards the White Tower and onto a scaffold. The scaffold was also covered in black, and it was a sombre sight, and she was allowed a private execution, despite there being around 200 to 1,000 people acting as witnesses. But the scaffold where Anne Boleyn was executed is not where the memorial stands today. A final myth which we must comment on is one that we cannot prove to be right or wrong. This involves a claim that a church in Suffolk, specifically Wharton Church, claims that they have discovered the heart of Anne Boleyn, or a vessel which once contained it, buried under the organ. They claim this was found as it was a place where Anne Boleyn enjoyed much time as a young woman on her uncle's land, but this has never been proven, and it could never be either, as there are no remains of Anne Boleyn which will ever be able to prove that this was the heart of the Queen. Also, it's likely that Anne would never have been allowed such commemoration, as Henry VIII wanted all images gone of her, even despite the fact that removing the heart after death was common for royals and powerful nobles during the Tudor period. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.